2020 began with excitement and promise of growth for our side community at the Envision Forum in January.
You're all deliberately working to dominate your markets.
When you're no longer operating and worrying about all the little weeds of your business, you can focus on growing it.
Look at how many of you are in the top 3 or top 5 in your respective markets.
We really are so lucky to be partnering with the very, very best in the profession and pushing this profession to be even better.
With brands that the market recognizes as the leaders in service and in results.
This is transformational for a real estate agent.
Side is able to launch my $2.5 billion career in less than like a month and a half. They gave me all the personnel and all the technology.
We're going to put all of our technology behind you. So you will now be able to be the leader in your market.
And save that agent tens of hours of time every week, because that's what's really going to make a big difference for them. And then invariably the client on the other end.
Every delicious moment I've had in real estate comes from being brave and putting myself out there and claiming a brand.
It's that brand recognition, just like if you see the arches of the McDonald's, that is the branding, it's the impressions.
It's been life-changing, and it's only just gotten started.
The power of Side nationwide is massive, and it's only getting bigger. There is so much power behind that network.
In this Houston market, we're able to really be at the forefront and be ahead of that curve.
That's one of the cool things about Side is they're like your eyes and ears in the industry too. There's nothing that they're not on top of.
Continuing to have evolution is where Side is just like, boom, that's what it's about.
Things happen in a blink of an eye. The industry changes that fast. I'm just glad to be a part of Side with all the technology and the resources that they provide. And I know I'm excited to see where we're going to be a year from now.
Breaking right now, sources telling Channel 2 the Houston Livestock Show and Rodeo will be shut down for the rest of the season due to concerns over coronavirus.
The reality for some 7 million people in the city by the Bay, they are expected to stay home, all in hopes, of course, of stopping the spread of COVID-19.
There are 18 states now that have statewide shelter-in-place ordinances in effect.
Immediately, a shockwave went through the community.
There was a lot of broken hearts. There were a lot of people saying, I don't know how I'm going to feed my family now.
This is a challenging period for us as an industry.
Things will develop every single day. We'll keep you up to date. The most important thing is to make sure your clients have what they need, and on the other, to be really safe about anything that you're doing.
Real estate for now is not listed as an essential business, and so we should not be doing showings.
We won't be able to do anything in person for a period of time, but what we can do is maintain the relationships we already have.
This is a watershed moment. What is society going to look like after we get out of this?
With a lot of uncertainty, trepidation, and questions from clients, we pushed forward, arming our partners with the latest information and COVID updates.
The federal government has included real estate as essential service. What it does allow and does clarify is that realtors can go out and show property to their clients.
Biggest concern obviously buyers are having is the economy and their ability to qualify to purchase a home if they might lose their job. But I think crisis or crash, real estate is still the safest place to be.
I actually think that we will see home prices remain relatively consistent.
Even through a pandemic, top agents leveraged partnering with Side to grow their businesses and create their own brands.
I would not want to be at the mercy of someone else's company right now. I'm so glad I took action when I did take action.
In the midst of a global pandemic, I decided to partner with Side.
I can't get the furniture in, I can't get desks, but I chose not to delay this.
Side as a company is well positioned to really help firms like my own weather the storm and be better positioned to service clients through the use of technology.
All of our agents were checking in with the business owners and letting them know we'd be there for them.
Our partners were organizing efforts to raise money for firefighters, or doing so to get meals to people who were being laid off, or masks for those who didn't have access.
Katie and I took on the flamingoing, the idea especially geared toward kids who were sad that they weren't getting to see their friends.
You shift the way you do business. And I feel like if you do that with an empathetic heart, you're still going to be successful in this business.
The lone wolf is vulnerable, but the pack survives.
So let's stick together as partners and help each other get through this.
Time is now to really double down on your marketing and your actions.
You know, for as much as the pandemic has put awful things into play, it has, I think, brought families together, and understanding and compassion has grown.
Our partners were able to transition seamlessly into that new normal, so they did not lose a single beat.
Thank you so much for having me at the Side Evolution Forum.
To succeed, we must all evolve.
You have to grow and you have to be able to delegate and leverage.
It was just really important to stay active and aware and visible in the community.
We were able to pull a 180 on how our perception of the market is going to be during COVID with the support from all the side groups.
Together, we are stronger. That's a theme of the convention.
We are part of the Side network of partners.
Anybody that asks me in the community that wants a donation, I know that I can and I will.
Truly grateful to be a part of this session, truly grateful to Side. It's been a tremendous year despite everything.
We have a very, very special person to ARIA, and that is our President 2021, Amy Kong.
ARIA shows me how to leverage our resources and relationship to help the community in need.
We are very much aligned with you, Amy.
Just really excited to work with Amy. And most recently, she partnered with us here at Side to launch Trust Real Estate.
With a much renewed sense of optimism, Side partners came together once again to collaborate and evolve new strategies in the new normal.
What I wanted to learn more about is your experience of having any type of fear. How do I own my neighborhood?
How would you guys define the luxury real estate market?
So this custom plan that you do this for all of the agents, right? I've got 6 top producers, and we're going to debate on which lead channel is the best lead channel for your real estate business.
As this unforgettable year came to a close, we learned how to adapt to a new way of doing business and engaging with our clients. We welcomed amazing new partners, and we are now able to look forward to a safer and even more successful 2021.
A successful 2021 would be just having more balance, and I think I have the tools and I have the systems in place to do so.
My goal is always just to exceed what I did the year before.
I do plan on recruiting in 2021. I'm at 5 now. I want to be at 10 agents by the time we're midway through the year.
We knew what we needed to be doing. It was just the fact of having this catalyst like COVID really push it forward.
When COVID started, we really got to sit back, listen, observe to what the industry was saying and take our own approach to it. And I think that that's where we saw substantial growth.
You have to always be pushing the limits, and learning new things. We have to innovate. Real estate's never going to be the same, even after we get a vaccine.
Technology pre-COVID was kind of the thing that was tearing all of us apart. And then in this really interesting way was this one thing that brought us all closer.
I think that side agents are going to emerge from this crisis in a better position than virtually any other agents in the country.
Good morning. Welcome to day 2 of Side by Side. Yesterday was a very jam-packed day, and I'm still buzzing from all the energy and excitement. Damon John's chat with Guy was inspirational and insightful. I love watching him on Shark Tank, and getting some personal time with him and Guy was pretty special. I hope that you were able to walk away with some great information, inspiration, and useful tips on growing your business. Today is another very full day of speakers, like Shannon McGahn, Mimi Nardi, and Merritt Hummer, and breakout sessions that will leave you ready to go and tackle your goals with new skills and a fire in your belly. Casey McLoed, our managing broker of Northern California, will be sitting down next with Shannon McGahn, the Chief Advocacy Officer for NAR, for a very timely update on the lobbying efforts that NAR is doing on behalf of realtors and our community. Thank you all again for joining us today, and with that, may I introduce one of my most trusted colleagues, Casey McLoed.
Thank you, Hillary, for the introduction, and welcome, Shannon. Thank you for being here with us today.
Great to be with you, Casey, and the Side Real Estate team. Thanks for having me.
But Shannon, first I want to explain to the agents what the Realtor Party is and how does NAR decide on which candidates we choose to support?
Well, that's a great question, and I could spend the rest of the day talking to you about the Realtor Party. But bottom line, the Realtor Party is the engine of NAR. It's what empowers us in Washington, in state houses, and in city halls to achieve the policy goals that will not just help our members, but also help our consumers and the American economy. And we remind our policymakers that real estate does make up nearly 1/5 of the GDP. With 1.4 million Realtor members, we are a political force that's about the size of the population of the state of Hawaii or the city of San Diego. And it's nonpartisan. That's why we champion Realtor Party Purple. We work in that Venn diagram where red meets blue, where bipartisan action can take place. And that's why the Realtor Party is respected both sides of the aisle, both sides of the Capitol. And it's through our PAC, the Realtor Party's political fundraising arm, that members can contribute to help elect those who will champion our issues. So if Realtor Party is the engine, our PAC is the fuel for that engine.
There's been some recent changes to your advocacy team there at NAR. So what were some of those changes and what should we expect with your new team?
Oh, sure. So, gosh, it feels like 2020 was already 2 years ago. So I'll go back to October 1st. That was the day that I had the privilege to take over the position as the Chief Advocacy Officer for NAR. So this group fills out a dream team of talent and professionalism, and I could not be more pleased with the advocacy operation that we have in DC. I do want to go back and explain a bit about what the process is with RPAC and Realtor Party, in particular with RPAC on candidate support. RPAC trustees determine which federal candidates RPAC will support, and they do not take this job lightly. We have members in every community across the country representing diverse views and backgrounds, but we all have one thing in common, and that's supporting the real estate industry and the Realtor Party. So like most PACs, our PAC is, works with elected officials, and there are many incumbents who are up for re-election to have credibility on Capitol Hill. If an incumbent has been supportive of realtor issues, our PAC should support that incumbent for re-election. So that's an area that the trustees look at. You look at things like voting record, legislative actions. There are questionnaires that come out in the election years. And this record shared with the respective state trustee committees. So the state trustees make a recommendation for support of candidates, which the national trustees may approve or amend or deny or maybe defer to a later time. And the national RPAC trustees policy is to only contribute to one candidate in any given election. So if the state and the national trustees disagree, then RPAC remains neutral in the race. So this year, the Realtor Party supported candidates in the 2020 election in a near 50-50 split, which is now reflective of the U.S., where the Senate is an actual 50-50 split, and the House of Representatives majority is very slim. So such an even split. Some people call that divided government. I prefer the term balanced. It leads to a more balanced public policy that is favorable to more bipartisan action that would be needed in order to get things across the finish line. So NAR and RPAC spent considerable resources to achieve this outcome in the November elections. There are, I think, we run about 90% of the opportunity races. So that's we had about 80 so opportunity races across the country in that election. And those are the realtor-to-realtor communications to support a candidate. And a majority of our federal independent expenditure campaigns, which are political communications that's targeted to the public, were victorious in November as well. And then on the state and local level, we achieved victory in about 75% of these races out of hundreds. So our independent expenditure program included over 200 mail campaigns, about 870,000 phone calls, 680 million online ad impressions, nearly 150 polls, dozens of radio and internet TV ads. So it's been a busy 2020, and everyone's happy that the election cycle is over and you go on to it next into 2022. But also don't want to forget that realtors themselves are naturals for public office. So already leaders in your communities, around 50 realtors were elected in November. There were 16 different ballot measures that NAR's Issues Mobilization Committee supported with grants, and those are beating back some harmful ballot initiatives and or encouraging others in states across the country. So it's been a very active election cycle, but we don't rest for long, and we're up and running and getting ready for 2022.
And that's great to hear so many realtors being elected to local office. And so you spoke about our opportunity races, but what were some of our other big wins in 2020 and any near misses that we came across?
The wins or the near misses, I never consider something a miss or a loss. It's just a continued fight. So as we all know, going into 2020, we had a very robust legislative advocacy agenda. And I will fully admit that COVID response was not on the list at that time. I think a lot of organizations were very not very surprised, but still able to pivot quickly. And I always compare politics to the weather. It's not our job or ability to predict it or to create it, but it is our job to always be prepared for it. And the advocacy team came prepared with an umbrella, and the benefits secured for realtors this year really were unprecedented. So there are 5 major relief bills that were passed between March and December, totaling nearly $4 trillion. And we were active on each and every one. We sent more than 100 letters up to Capitol Hill, to congressional leadership. We were not able to go to the Hill room to room, but we were able to go Zoom to Zoom and work the phones and email communications and to ensure that these were still happening. And honestly, I would say that that when it comes to members of Congress, that it's been strange how available and how active everyone's been virtually, and it may be from their district, but we haven't really missed a beat when it comes to just the number of contacts and the FPC activity and in-district activity, where it might not be a physical meeting, but the virtual ones are still happening. Also, we have had other issues that we've been fighting for over the last couple years that had been identified in surveys to membership that weren't directly related to COVID, but have still been included in these efforts. One of those is the effort to expand broadband access. Now, everybody is, working from home, living from work feels like the same thing, and it is more crucial than ever to have access to broadband. So $6 billion was included in new funding for access to broadband in the law that was signed in December. And then another really big issue that came up that we've been fighting for since March is the need for rental assistance. And as you all are familiar with, the CDC had put out an eviction moratorium late summer. So rental assistance was more important than ever to ensure that we weren't having a multiple housing crisis with evictions and with the inability for property owners to make ends meet in addition to that. So right before the clock struck midnight in 2020, going into 2021, that $25 billion in rental assistance made it into law, along with the stimulus checks and expansion of many of those small business programs. There are some issues that are still out there on the table on the federal side. Access to remote online notary is a big one that we've been fighting for since by March, and has been tackled on a state level, but it is something that would a more permanent solution we think is required. So we continue to fight for that. And we do we have secured bipartisan, bicameral, meaning House and Senate support for remote online notary. So that's something that will continue into this coming up Congress. Again, there is a number of issues that will come up when looking at state and local government funding. And, we've seen $4 trillion in COVID aid signed into law. That's doubling federal spending from a normal year. We would have liked to see the liability protection in there, state and local funding. There's the SALT marriage penalty. As you know, the SALT repeal was in the House passed bill, the HEROES Act, but it didn't make it into law. But those are things that, again, we don't consider it a miss. We consider it a continued fight and an opportunity to keep going to Capitol Hill and to make our case.
All right, thank you. And in addition to online notary issues like that, what are some other key issues realtors should be paying attention to here in 2021?
Housing availability and affordability. That's an area that we're focused on with the incoming administration, with President Biden and the new housing team coming in addition to fair housing and the enforcement of fair housing and other COVID responses. So those are the three areas that I would highlight. Housing availability and affordability includes everything from tax incentives for home ownership to construction of affordable housing, things like preserving the critical 1031 like-kind exchange. So there are a number of areas there, and we'll be working on developing these legislative solutions. Fair housing, the federal government has no greater partner in enforcing fair housing than with their realtors. And so we're continuing to educate members of Congress on our efforts, including the ACT plan. And that's been something that Brian Green, now running our policy shop, has done an excellent job and will be continuing to do this year. And then, of course, as I mentioned, other COVID responses that are coming up. We know that Congress is looking at potentially a first quarter activity there. And so we'll be there every step of the way.
Awesome. And then a question that I know a lot of people have is going to be, what does the Biden presidency look like for the real estate industry?
Sure. Well, I do not have access to a crystal ball right now, but I have requested it. We'll see if that comes through. But everyone's very excited to see President Biden's $15,000 first-time home buyer tax credit proposal. That could be particularly helpful for minority and millennial home buyers who may have struggled to save for a down payment. It's just, you have this amazing interest rate environment, and you see that there is public support for encouraging property ownership. But it's still, when folks are juggling with student loan payments and this relentless housing price growth, access to tax credits and down payment assistance is helpful there. So that's something that we are discussing, identifying there. The flip side of that is that the then Biden campaign had also put out some papers on 1031 like-kind exchange and putting that on the chopping block as a potential pay for other programs. And so we quickly went to action and talked to our allies on Capitol Hill to make sure that they had all the right points on how mom and pop organizations use 1031 like-kind exchange and how it's a tax fairness, because you're reinvesting that money, and you don't want to, especially at a time when you're looking at issues with commercial growth and areas of development and things like opportunity zones. It's not the time to penalize those who want to invest in areas or to transfer property. And those are issues that have enjoyed bipartisan support. And so we stand ready to work with our strong relationships on both sides of the aisle, both sides of the Capitol, to lend a hand moving those policies forward.
Regarding the runoff election in Georgia, flipping both seats blue, what does a Democrat majority in the House and Senate, plus now the White House, mean for private property rights?
Sure. So I'll go back to what I mentioned earlier when we're looking at Realtor Party and the idea of divided government versus balanced government. You don't get more balance than the 50-50 Senate. And there's one area that I point to when you're looking at what are potential congressional actions, especially when you're dealing with a new administration. It's a 6-syllable word. It might be the only 6-syllable word I know. Reconciliation, which is one where you can pass something with a simple majority of the Senate instead of needing to get the filibuster proof 60 votes. So all eyes are going to look into what could be done on reconciliation. I would point back to 20 years ago when there was a 50-50 Senate and President Bush came into office in 2001. At that point, it was Senator Trent Lott, Senator Tom Daschle, and they basically did an even split when it came to committees and funding. Not sure that's going to happen. a lot of changes have happened in the Senate and the Senate rules and protocol over the last 20 years. And so we'll see what that looks like with Senator Schumer and Senator McConnell. But those are relationships, again, that we have had for several years, if not decades. And the beauty of the Realtor Party is that even if office holders change and the who has the gavels may change, our issues don't change and our arguments don't change. But we simply can ensure that we have the right material, the right messaging, the right facts, the right arguments to make the case and to advocate on your behalf.
All right, and thank you, Shannon. So do you have any closing thoughts that you'd like to share with our agents today?
Well, sure. I would love to give one last thank you for inviting me to be with you all today. Cannot wait to see you in person. I think we're very excited to see the vaccines making the rounds, and we hope that you all are staying safe and sane here in 2021. But the most important thing is that we're here to advocate for you. We're here to tell your story. And to tell your story, we need to hear it. So the way I mentioned, we do regular survey work through Dr. Lawrence Yoon and his team. Advocacy has based on our new structure that we have a team of federal political representatives who have their different regions and work with the states to ensure that all of our advocacy efforts, that we're gathering information. When the political reps during an election season, they're very busy with the campaign activity. But when it's a so-called off year, they're very busy in legislative activity. So I would just highly encourage you to work with your state associations. And as issues come up and you have particular anecdotal evidence, real evidence, it doesn't matter. It's a story. We need to just have information on what are the policies, issues that you have and what you may be facing so that we can advocate for you. And that's where the partnership really makes a difference. So thank you again, Casey, for the opportunity to be with you all today and look forward to working with you all in a successful 2021.
All right. Thank you very much, Shannon. We really appreciate your time today. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you, Casey and Shannon. It is impressive that a fifth of all Realtor members were able to take advantage of a portion of the $1 trillion in relief packages. Also very exciting for our buyers is that President Biden is pushing for a $15,000 tax credit for first-time buyers. Coming up next is Mimi Nardi and her guidance on how to play when the score is tight. Leveraging her experience as a professional athlete, college professor, and business entrepreneur, she will be sharing how to apply sports psychology into whatever situation you are facing and be victorious.
All right. I'm so excited to be here. I just want to say thank you so much to the Side community for having me. And I'm going to talk to you guys today about something that's really near and dear to my heart, sports psychology for business leadership. Specifically, I want to talk about how to play when the score is tight. So this is going to be about a 35-minute presentation. I'm going to tell you a little bit about myself, talk about sports as an epistemology. What do I mean by that? Really dig into the idea of how to play when the score is tight by looking at 4 psychologies of tight games. Tight games, I mean that literally in sporting events, but I also mean that more importantly in business and in life. And I want you to really reflect on where you are right now in your business and in your life. As far as my personal introduction, I know some of you may have already met my acquaintance or seen some of the videos that I've done. I know that I heard a rumor that my Beyonce parody video was circulating on Slack. My husband is a real estate broker with Society Real Estate and Development at Side. He made that transition earlier this year, and so far, he's loving it. I'm loving it. I am married to real estate, so I am as excited, if not more excited, that he is, that he's getting the great, service and support through Side. But my personal history is kind of an interesting one. My professional history is an interesting one. And I always want to preface it by giving my philosophy on career cycles to give context to what I've been doing with myself over the past several years. And start off with a book recommendation. If you have ever read Outliers by Malcolm Gladwell, you'll already know what I'm talking about. If you haven't read it, I recommend that you take a look at this book. It's really fantastic. One of the key concepts that I really love in this book is the idea that if you invest 10,000 hours into anything, you can become prodigious at that thing. So basically, there is a clear, simple mathematical equation. 10,000 hours into something equals, excellence or accomplishment on the back end of that. And what I have seen is that 10,000 hours for me is about a 10-year cycle. I do notice that I'm becoming more and more efficient as I go through these cycles. But the way I look at my life and my experience, I want to commit to something for a certain time, really make sure that I reach, what I feel like is a satisfactory level of accomplishment at that. And then I try to translate that experience into a new endeavor. So what has that looked like? My first career cycle, I actually started quite young and quite early as a professional athlete. By the age of 14, I was on the U.S. Olympic development track here to play soccer. But when I was 15, the country of Ghana formed a women's national team. And my dad is originally from Ghana in West Africa. And I was able to leverage my dual citizenship to try out for the Ghanaian women's national soccer team. And I had a 7-year tenure with the national team that culminated with me playing in the 2003 FIFA Women's World Cup. I also have a silver medal from the African Women's Cup of Nations tournament in 2002. So if you are a sports enthusiast, a soccer enthusiast, women's soccer fan in particular, I do have a TEDx talk about that experience that you can check out, just called African Women's Soccer and Empowerment, Memoirs of a Black Queen. After this very amazing experience that I had playing soccer that took me all around the world, I just threw myself and hurled myself into academia. And so the second career cycle that I engaged in was as a college professor. And I was very privileged to teach at some of the greatest universities and institutions here in Southern California, at UCLA, at Occidental, at LMU. I taught classes in environmental science and public health. I've been able to, publish and speak on many different kinds of academic topics specifically related to health and the environment. But that cycle also kind of, turned over and came to something of an end. And I have moved on into a space of social entrepreneurship. So now what I'm doing is taking all of the experiences that I've had before and leveraging them into opportunities to really make big social impact and social change. So I do speaking. I have an organization called Race, Class, and Parenting that supports the dissemination of information to parents to kind of support them as they parent from a stronger social justice perspective. And I'm the co-founder and executive director of the Nardi Sports Foundation, which is the charitable giving arm of my husband's real estate business. So that's who I am in a nutshell when I'm not out there doing Beyonce videos. But I want to talk today about sports, because sports is the foundational experience and it underlies the success that I've had in all of the different things that I have endeavored to do. Athlete itself is a privileged identity that I've been able to leverage in many different circumstances. But the most important thing for me about playing sports is that I have seen and come to understand that sports is its own epistemology. I'm really passionate about knowing how to know things, and I am an interdisciplinarian. So when I say epistemology really means a way of knowing things. And I believe that there are many valid different ways to know things through science, through religion, through philosophy, ancestral knowledge, logical reasoning, sometimes even just intuition. But I think, it's worth bringing sports into the conversation as an epistemology, as a way of understanding the universal laws of nature and universal sociological principles and universal business principles. So that's kind of what I want to get into today. And specifically, I want to talk about how to play when the score is tight. So leveraging sports and my sports experience, I want to talk about how you can play when the score is tight for you in your business and in your life. And why is it important to know how to play when the score is tight? It basically all boils down to this. Whenever you have an imbalanced competition where one team is much, much better than the other, the outcome of that game is really just dependent on technical issues, not tactical choices. So it doesn't really provide as much insight into critical universal dynamics. And when you think about it, you yourself as a realtor, if you're going up, let's create a competition between you and another person who's going up for a particular business. If your professional experience far outweighs the other person that you are competing for in that business, you can see that it's not really such a tactical issue. It's really just that you have, technically more skills and more experience that you have to leverage. But when there are well-matched competitions, the critical difference always comes down to strategy. It comes down to coaching. And in reality, life and business are full of tight scores, of closely balanced competition. I'm going to argue that 2021 is a tight game. 2021 is a championship year already. We are down already because we've conceded coronavirus, which has brought health risks, limited our freedom of movement. It's, threatened livelihoods. It's created a cultural disruption. Just, we have distance learning for people who are parents or grandparents or mentors to children. We see the impact of that on our lives. There's also been a lot of social and political unrest throughout 2020 that we are carrying into 2021. So all of this has caused us to reevaluate our progress on the ideals we believe in as Americans. It's put strain on our relationships and on our vision for the future. But a champion always overcomes greater obstacles than a winner. There's a difference between a winner and there's a difference between a champion. And it's going to take strategic thinking to have the outcomes that we really want for 2021. And we're going to have to leverage all of our previous wins to have the outcomes that we really want in 2021. We've had years before where we've been winners, where we've come out ahead, but this is going to be a championship year because it is a tight game. What's funny about looking at the way soccer games go is that often at halftime, if the score is 2-1, the final score is 3-2. This is something that happens very, very frequently, which is an interesting phenomenon that I just kind of picked up on over time as an athlete. Usually we have 4 different scenarios that play out. You either are ahead 2-1 and you go on to win 3-2. You are ahead 2-1 and you end up losing 3-2 by the end of the game. You're losing 2-1 at half and you go on and concede 3-2 by the end of the game, or you're losing 2-1 at half and somehow you muster the fight to win the game 3-2 by the end. It's just very interesting. But these 4 scenarios, when you look at them and you really kind of take it apart, dismantle it, unpack it, what you see is that if the score is 2-1 at half, it means the teams are closely matched. There's evidence already that both teams have the capacity to score, and there's evidence that both teams have vulnerabilities that can be exploited. And again, I just think this is such an important and powerful metaphor for our lives, for our businesses, because we are often in scenarios, and arguably again this year in a scenario where we have seen that we have the capacity to overcome. We have the capacity to be great. We have the capacity to win. But we've also seen that we have vulnerabilities that we had imagined and that we had never imagined prior to the moment that we're in right now. So we have to really be extremely strategic and specific in leveraging, the experiences that we've had and great ideas to move us forward towards the outcomes that we want. Fundamentally, it boils down to this. It's you. It's your business versus, and you can just fill in the blank. Fill in the blank right now. It could be COVID. It could be, vicissitudes in the market. It could be economic changes and economic uncertainty. It's a tough match. And also, what's fantastic about this information that I'm sharing with you is that it's so relevant now, but it's not your last tough match, and it will be relevant again in the future. The important thing to remember is that if you are listening to this talk right now, you are still in the game. There's this great UFC fighter that always says, if you're able to tap out, it means you're able to recover also. So if you are still in it, if you're still listening right now, there's still time on the clock and there's still an opportunity to turn this game around. But at the same time, there's still potential vulnerability to your production right now. So we still don't know exactly where we're going with COVID. We don't know where we're going with the economy. We don't know about, seasonal shifts in the market. We don't know what's ahead. The 8th level of Jumanji, who knows what it's going to look like. So right now, we just need to be poised and prepared, strategically thinking about how it is that we're going to overcome whatever comes our way so that we can finish strong. The question that you have to ask yourself is, where are you in your life and in your business right now? And this may seem like an obvious question, but honestly, so often people do not end up coming out ahead in tight scores or in tight games because they aren't able to accurately, correctly, critically evaluate where they really are. They are not aware if they are ahead, or they're not aware if they're behind. So the questions that you need to ask yourself: if you are ahead, chances are you haven't really struggled to close business or to generate new deals in the past several months to a year. We know that the real estate market has been, surprisingly resilient and able to withstand all of these uncertainties. So you may say, my business is going well at this point. You may have been able to achieve some sort of expansion of your brand through this time. That's been the case even for my own husband. He actually launched his business with Side in the midst of the pandemic. You may be maintaining your well-being, and you may have achieved a functional rhythm relatively quickly. So you may be situated in a position where you feel like you're ahead in this scenario right now. On the flip side, you might feel like you're behind in this scenario right now. You may be struggling to close the business that you have, struggling to win listings and buyers, struggling to find new business, or struggling to adapt in other areas of your personal life that are affecting your business in turn, because we know how closely linked all of these situations are. So I want to break down the 4 psychologies of tight games. And I already kind of explained the scenarios to you, where you're ahead and you're able to win, where you're ahead but you concede your lead, where you're behind and you lose, versus being behind and being able to come back from behind to still win. So let's look at the first psychology. When you are ahead, what does it take to win the game? Because the game's not over. It's going to take discipline. It's going to take focus. It's going to take an understanding of the risks of complacency. Although you're ahead at this moment, it's not the time to be complacent, just because, again, of the uncertainty of our current circumstances. You need to understand how to strategically leverage even a small advantage, the small advantage that you may have right now. And you need to maintain a willingness to take positive risks. And finally, you're going to need a killer instinct. So you need to know that moment, when to move forward with a little bit more aggression, to go for the kill. And these are part of the psychologies that you have to leverage if you feel like you're ahead right now and you want to finish strong through this phase. If you are ahead and you want to win, what I'm going to call on you to do right now is take advantage of this opportunity to level up your branding. So think about what's been working for you over the past, again, 6 months to 1 year. How have you been able to differentiate yourself over the past 6 months to a year? What new opportunities have been presented to you over the past 6 months to a year where we've had such an interesting transition? Opportunities are there for those who are scanning the environment to see, and you really need to take advantage, again, of the fact that you are slightly ahead. Double down, lean in, and finish strong. The second psychology that is, oftentimes the most frustrating is when you're ahead at a certain point, but you lose. So looking at that same situation of being ahead, what happens to people, or what happens to people in their business or in their personal lives that results in conceding the lead? A lot of times it comes from not being able to critically self-reflect and evaluate and understand that while you're ahead, it's actually a tight lead. It's not, as great of a margin as you might have originally conceived. So when you ask yourself these questions about where am I in my life and in my business, where you may find that you have, some advantages in business, maybe there are some areas in your personal life, your self-care, things that you really need to attend to. And that would be, having that cautious optimism to lean in and go forward. What does it look like in life being ahead and losing? If we think back to a few years ago, it was fascinating to watch what happened in the Clinton and Trump election. And, regardless of your politics, I think there's a really important lesson to learn. And I love these quotes that came out of the Washington Post. If we look at what happened with Hillary Clinton's campaign, just days before the election, after weeks of believing that Michigan was safely blue, the pro-Hillary Clinton Super PAC Priorities USA polled voters there only to discover that it was a one-point race. The group quickly poured millions into the state. The Clinton campaign did similarly. And on the eve of the election, aides sent in Clinton herself, as well as her top surrogate, President Obama. But it was too late. And again, I've been trying to make the case here to you guys that life is full of tight scores. It is, regardless of the industry that you're in, regardless of the business that you're in, and also in our personal lives, there are tight scores all the time that are, pivotal moments, moments of transition, moments of inflection in our life and in our business. And this is an example of, one as it pertained to political campaign. Not being critically self-aware, understanding where you really are situated, understanding that the margin of your lead is smaller than you think. So again, the caution there is to, if you are ahead, make sure that you are still willing to take risks, be cautiously optimistic, have that killer instinct, but also make sure that you're not too trusting or becoming complacent in a way that can create vulnerability for you at the last minute where there won't be enough time to recover. Think about it this way. In your business and in your life, the best defense is a strong offense. So always lean into your expertise with your foot on the gas pedal so you don't give up the lead that you have. All right, the third psychology of close games is being behind and losing. In some ways, a person might say that this is kind of an expected outcome, but it's not really an expected outcome because there's so much opportunity still. If you remember what I'm saying, in tight games, it's not a situation where you were completely outmatched, but you actually had an opportunity. So what happened? Usually it's a psychology of self-pity, a lack of resilience, lack of support, lack of creativity, and not realizing how closely matched the teams or the situation really is. Sometimes this happens where you don't understand that your opponent still has an upper hand. So you may, find that you're fighting your way back, but not be sensitive to the fact that, hey, you still have areas of vulnerability. You still have deficits that you need to look into within your business. What does this look like in real time, in real life? I am so moved by the story of Jeremy Richmond. And I just want to share with you guys for a couple minutes a little bit of a video, just, in a moment, a video of him speaking. And Jeremy Richmond had a child who was killed in a school shooting. And, he is just displayed such powerful resilience and leadership. And he turned that tragedy into an opportunity to educate people en masse and to talk about, how we need to resolve these issues of gun violence in schools and what we can do. And he did beautiful work, he and his wife. So I just want to kind of cut to him so that you can see a little bit of the work that he has done.
I'm a neuroscientist, and I'm going to talk about the science of violence and compassion. And hopefully by the end of my talk, you'll understand why a geeky guy like me would be talking at a storytelling artist summit. But let me start at the beginning, which is a little bit dark. I'm here because we have an epidemic of violence. And we're all familiar, unfortunately, all too familiar with this fact. Worldwide, we know that half of the kids in the world are victimized violently every year. Every one of us is going to be touched by violence directly or indirectly many times in our lives. Violence to self and violence to others. When it comes to the United States, none of us are surprised that we have big problems. Violent crimes occur many times a minute, homicide a couple an hour, rape every 6.5 minutes. When it comes to violence to self, a suicide is completed every 14 minutes. And there's 5 people that die by drug overdose every hour. These are sobering statistics. And unfortunately, 1,616 days ago, I became one of these statistics, and that's why I come to you today. As a parent who At that time, lost my only child, our beautiful girl, 6 years old, Avielle, when she was murdered in her first grade classroom with 19 of her friends and classmates and 6 of her educators in the Sandy Hook Elementary School shootings in Newtown, Connecticut. As you can imagine, that turned your world upside down. It derailed everything in our life, everything that we had all the hopes and aspirations to do. You literally lie on the floor feeling like the world is spinning out of control, and if you don't hold on, you're just going to get spun off. And in that depth of horrible heartbreak and despair, my wife and I said, we have to do something. We have to change things.
So you can see in that video of Jeremy Richmond, just, the passion that he has brought to a very tragic situation. And it's amazing because there's so much inspiration to glean there from a person who's been able to take such a negative situation and turn it into a positive, inspirational and teaching opportunity. However, in March 2019, unfortunately, Jeremy Richmond took his own life. And when I learned of this story and this situation, and I learned, that he had not been able to fight all of the way through, it really kind of gave me pause. And I really spent a lot of time in reflection about his situation and his circumstances. And I also recognized that this is a vulnerability that we have. Again, when we're in moments of tight scores, you have to be able to read the game well for yourself, and where you cannot, you need the support and the friendship and the insight of people who are going to be able to help read the game for you. So where it seemed that he had bounced back, where it seemed that he had recovered, he was not aware of the vulnerabilities that still existed in himself. And, clearly other people in his life weren't able to recognize also the vulnerabilities that were still there. He had put on such a brave face and was making such a positive impact that, the world really still wasn't sensitive to the vulnerabilities that he had. So this is really important about, being behind and making sure that you don't let that that moment of being behind slide into a complete loss. So what is it that we need to do when we are behind in our business? If you have answered those questions and you look at your business and you see that, hey, I'm not where I need to be, things are off track, you need to get back to the fundamentals. And you need to take the small and consistent steps that you need to turn things around. So, I love this quote: if every act is efficient and no acts are inefficient, then you can't help but to become a success. So what that means is you need to break down where you are and go back to, the basic, fundamental, rudimentary steps of your business building and do each one of those in an efficient way and really cut out anything that is inefficient for the time until you can begin to gain the momentum for yourself to turn your business back and get yourself back on course towards a positive trajectory. You need to seek out accountability partners and think outside of the box, but not just throw caution to the wind. What's amazing about the side community is there's so much support that's offered. I know that coaching is available to you guys. So this is the kind of accountability and support that you'd be looking to get. So that way you can feel reinforced psychologically, you can feel supported, but that you also have someone who's scanning in your business to see where vulnerabilities may still lie. Even if it seems like you might, have a little bit of a tick of momentum, you want sustainable progress. And that's going to take more than one mind working on the problems that you're dealing with and unpacking those problems to make sure that you are scanning and leaving no hidden vulnerabilities. And the final psychology, is the idea of being behind and winning. And what does it take to come from behind and win the game? It takes vision. It takes faith, which I also would describe as grateful expectation. It takes, diligent work ethic, critical self evaluation and the ability to make mid-course corrections. So, you want to be decisive and make decisions firmly, but you also want to be constantly, again, scanning and seeing, what do I need to do better? Where am I still having vulnerabilities? Where are there still threats? Or where are there additional opportunities that I might need to lean into? So that mindset of constantly evaluating and making those corrections. And then finally, the ability to build up the fight. Best example of myself, best example of being behind and winning in life is my own life story. So, looking at a person like myself, an African-American woman, child of an immigrant, I, in many ways would say that I kind of was born into a situation where I was behind socially. If you look at racial barriers, just as an example, only 38% of Black students finish college in the United States. Again, like I mentioned, I'm a first generation African American. In 1981, the year that I was born in Ghana, 58 out of every 1,000 infants that were born didn't make it past the age of 5. So, it's just by, good fortune that I happened to be born on this side of the pond rather than the other, where so many of my cousins and other relatives were born, because I just narrowly evaded those additional risks. When we look at gender barriers, Black women represent only 2% of the science and engineering profession. And I have already mentioned to you guys kind of the experience in the career that I've had in sciences. So many, many different kinds of barriers to overcome there. And then those just compounded by other kinds of life experiences, serious illnesses and injuries that I've had, assaults that I've survived, miscarriages, just so many different kinds of tragedies, one way or another, that have compounded the relative disadvantage that I've experienced in some ways. But what does it take to come from behind and really win? And at this point in my life, I would describe it as, certainly a victorious outcome. My husband and I both are running successful businesses. We have a family that we are growing, and we're able to make a positive impact in the world. And those are the standards by which I measure winning. As I mentioned, you're going to have to use faith, creativity, and excellence to turn a game around. So whether it's kind of, on a broader kind of time scale over a life course that you're considering whether or not you're behind and how you're trying to find a way to win, or whether it's in a shorter interim time scale, it might be like in a specific instance or season in your business or moment in your life, it's going to take self-belief. So I encourage you to be mindful of what you consume. During the time window that you're going through a process of, trying to transition yourself from behind to pushing yourself to a position of being ahead or in the lead, you need to be very, very mindful of the kinds of content that you consume. But this is something that you need to look at in general over your entire life course, because everything that you feed into yourself, into your mind, creates autosuggestion. So it creates in your subconscious an idea of who you are and what you can do. And those are the seeds that you plant that actually sprout into faith or fear later on in your life. So, you need to begin and develop the practice of making sure that you are consuming things that are positive, that are restorative, that are inspiring, that motivate you. And you really need to eliminate things that detract from your self-confidence or from your focus or from the vision that you have for yourself, for your business, or for your future. Because again, when you squeeze a sponge, whatever's in it is what's going to come out. You can't tell often if the sponge is wet or dry until you squeeze it. So you want to make sure that you are feeding yourself. So in those moments where you are squeezed, where the pressure is on, where it's tense, out of that will pour what you have been feeding yourself and feeding your soul. And that's where you're going to find that deep motivation. You're going to need excellent foundational skills. Another way of describing this is just your professionalism. You want to make sure that you have, a proficient mastery of the foundational skills of your business, because that's what you're going to have to go back to and lean on and rely on at this moment to gradually, consistently, persistently move yourself from that, negative space to that positive space. You need the consistency on those small things to create the momentum, to shift the field in your favor. You're also going to need to have the courage to take big risks in the right moment. and you're going to have to be extremely adaptable. And those are the skills that you're going to need in a moment, in a season, or over a lifetime, depending on how you're considering this particular suggestion. So again, going back to where you are in your life and in your business, either you're ahead, and what you need to do is really focus on the ways that you can strategically leverage the advantage that you have while being cautious and sensitive and still getting support from the community around you to continue to scan to see where there may be vulnerabilities that you aren't sensitive to. If you're behind, what you need to do is get back to those fundamental rudimentary steps of your business. Focus on your professionalism. You're going to have to mind what you consume so that you can focus on faith, creativity, and excellence. Again, leveraging the support that you have from the community at Side, from the community that you have through your other professional and personal networks, so that you can pull yourself gradually towards the outcomes that you want. And the final note and most important note on how to play when the score is tight, you got to keep playing the game. You got to play to the whistle. So you need to know the difference between being ahead and winning, because that's where so many people falter. And you need to know the difference between being behind and losing, because that's where a lot of people falter as well. And I love this Jordan quote that I just want to end on, another great athlete to derive wisdom and encouragement from. He says, "I never lost a game. I just ran out of time." So long as you still have time on the clock, you still have an opportunity to leverage the advantages that you have, the knowledge and professionalism that you have, and the community that's available to you to win the game and have the best outcome that you want. Thanks so much, you guys, for listening. I hope this was helpful. Definitely let me know how this hit you, how this impacted you. I'd love to hear your feedback.
Thank you, Mimi. What she spoke about truly struck a chord with me, as I also spent a great amount of time as a competitive swimmer and learned very similar tactics and have applied them as appropriate during whichever game situation I find myself in. Next, we have our Chief Operating Officer who joined Side last year, Elizabeth C., speaking with Merritt Hummer, a partner at Bain Capital, about the changes we saw in the real estate industry last year, especially with a heavy shift to more virtual meetings and deals being consummated via Zoom and less in person. They will also focus on what to expect this year, as many people continue their shifts to living in less traditional urban areas. Take it away, Elizabeth.
Hello, everyone, and welcome. I'm Elizabeth C., Chief Operating Officer for Side. Today, I have the pleasure of speaking with Merritt of Bain Capital Ventures about the state of prop tech and the future of real estate in a post-pandemic world. She joined Bain Capital Ventures in 2018 and focused on investment in fintech, prop tech, and commerce tech, including B2B marketplaces. Welcome, Merritt, and thank you so much for joining us today. In your role, you've had such great experience in seeing how technology is disrupting so many different industries, and I look forward to this conversation. So first, let's all agree it's been a crazy 2020, right? It was a pretty scary time, but I think one of the really interesting things that we saw with Side was that the industry was able to reinvent, rebound, and ultimately succeed. I think we're seeing some record number of transactions that are happening. What do you see that's happening? What do you see in the overall industry, and how is that going to change once we hopefully get out of this situation?
Well, first, I just want to say, Elizabeth, thank you so much for having me. It's really a pleasure to have this conversation with you, and an honor that you invited me to talk to the esteemed group of Side real estate agents, who I know are sort of the leading real estate agents across the country. So thank you for that. And I think it's a really topical question, especially as we enter 2021, where, finally we can put the dreadful year of 2020 behind us and start thinking about the future and, what we can do, what we can make of the chaos that ensued over the last 12 months. But I think as it relates to real estate, to state the obvious, there's just a huge sea change underway in the real estate industry. And I think, rewinding back to April of 2020, I think there was a fear, a legitimate fear at the time, that activity would come to a grinding halt, which it may have done for a month or two, but to your point, very, very quickly rebounded. And I think by early to midsummer, we saw transaction volumes that exceeded, what they would have been before the pandemic. So, I think the real estate industry largely, or at least residential real estate transaction activity, has been primarily has been a beneficiary for the most part of the pandemic. And obviously other aspects of the real estate world probably have suffered. But I think the major demographic shift that we're all observing right now is a migration away from urban centers to suburban areas and more rural areas. And I think that's a counter trend to what we had seen over the last few years, where the opposite was happening, where you were really seeing, especially led by the millennial generation, a lot of millennials not wanting to live in the suburbs, wanting to live in urban areas within walking distance to restaurants and shops, really wanting an urban experience in their adulthood. And I think that trend has now reversed, and that very same demographic is shifting out to reconsidering suburban areas and even rural areas as places to live. So I think there's sort of that micro change happening within cities, but then more broadly, there's a migration from certain cities, maybe tier 1 cities like San Francisco, to other cities that might have been considered tier 2 cities, tier 3 cities historically, are all of a sudden much more attractive to people now that remote work is becoming normal. And people are recognizing that the cost of living difference between living in a Denver or Charlotte is really remarkable when you compare it to San Francisco and New York and cities like that. So I think we're seeing those two dual trends at the same time, and it obviously has important implications for real estate agents and where people should take their businesses in the future. My understanding is most side real estate agents are based in California. And so does it, it sort of begs the question, should some of the side real estate agents think about opening up shop in secondary markets, and really thinking about building books of business outside of the core centers of LA, Sacramento, San Francisco, large California cities where perhaps there's going to be less demand in the future.
Oh yeah. So I think the key advice for them is really think about what areas you're covering, where can you extend past that, what type of partnerships you can build to make sure you can take advantage of the changes that are occurring in the overall demographic changes.
I think so, yeah. And I think it's worth just reiterating, I don't think this is a temporary shift. I don't think that it's the case. My belief is, anyway, I don't think it's the case for the next 6 months there will be people moving to cities outside of San Francisco, but then as soon as the vaccine is fully deployed, then everyone's going to come back. I think people will settle into their new lives. And so it's worth taking a long-term view and thinking about where, how the population distribution will fundamentally change as a result of COVID, and what that means for where the transaction volume will reside, and ultimately where side real estate agents can generate transactions.
Okay, got it. So I think it'll be important then also from a side lingo standpoint to really think about how you can possibly expand your team, build a team, and one that has a reach that's much further than kind of your local area that you're traditionally been used to.
Exactly. And hopefully with, tools like that enable remote home touring and remote work, side agents and teams won't necessarily feel like they need to be limited to certain geographic areas, which I think is really how the residential brokerage industry has worked historically. It's, people have sort of owned zones, and I think geographic proximity has been really important when people have thought about building their teams and their businesses. But going forward, we should challenge that assumption. It's not necessarily the case that geographic proximity needs to be a constraint. If there are creative ways that you can win, cultivate new clients and ultimately convert transactions outside of that zone, I think that it's in everyone's interest to figure out ways to do that, to just expand the boundaries on where you can operate as a business.
Right. It's interesting because it's almost like saying, in the same way the general industry is impacted by remote work, our partner agents should really be thinking about how they think about growing teams in a remote work kind of fashion, so that they can actually follow the overall demographic and take advantage of it.
So getting to know each other over Zoom too. I mean, do Do you have to meet potential clients in person repeatedly in order to build trust? I think increasingly people would say no. At least in my business in venture capital, I think a lot of deals are getting done without having met without having met in person. And that's something I see every day, and something that I know Bain Capital is becoming increasingly comfortable with. So I think if you just extrapolate my experience to the real estate industry, the same will be true. I think agents don't necessarily need to meet their customers in person as much anymore.
Awesome. Great. Now, talking a little bit about kind of your background, I think you've got such a great background in seeing a lot of different ways that technology is really impacting the world. And I think in particular, you've seen a lot that's happened around independent professionals. And I'd love for you to talk a little bit about what are you seeing, because I know real estate agents are really a part of this bigger movement. And I'd love for you to talk a little bit about that.
Absolutely. Yeah. So, this is one of my favorite topics, actually. As remote work has really taken hold and people have been able to kind of scatter across the country, work from wherever they please, I think one of the consequences of that will probably be that individuals will feel a little bit less tied to their parent organization, to the extent they ever had one in the first place. But I think especially for professions like real estate agents and insurance agents and wealth advisors and frankly, anyone who operates as an entrepreneur within a bigger organization, who kind of already operates very autonomously and who doesn't really report to anyone, is sort of an independent agent. Anyone whose job has that nature, I think, will feel less loyal to and less tied to the parent company that they have worked for historically. And I think side plays an incredibly important role in this movement, because it makes it really easy for those real estate agents who might have a little bit of an entrepreneurial itch, who might all of a sudden have said, pre-COVID, maybe weren't crazy about the brokerage that they were working for various reasons. And now post-COVID, don't even benefit from the office space, don't have access to the printers, see their colleagues in person. Support staff might be more difficult because it's not in person. And so all the benefits that you might have associated with a traditional brokerage pre-COVID have probably largely gone away. And you're kind of just doing all this stuff. Traditional agents are acting as entrepreneurs in their day-to-day more than they ever were before. And so in that new world, I think it will become really appealing for people to say, why don't I just make this official? Why don't I just become a true entrepreneur and go off on my own? What benefit am I really deriving from the traditional brokerage I work for? So I think we're going to see a really big mind shift over, it's already happening, frankly, and the early side real estate agents have been the pioneers in this movement. But I think we'll see more and more people who adopt that mentality of wanting to go off on their own. And I think there will be a sort of a surge of entrepreneurial activity in professions where people are already doing that day to day. If you look at their daily activities. So I think, and real estate agents, like I said, are one area where this is happening. But from my vantage point, I actually see it happening in other industries as well. So in the insurance industry, it's starting to happen. Where there are a lot of parallels between real estate agents and insurance agents, but a lot of insurance agents have the same dilemma where many of them want to become entrepreneurs and build their own businesses, but they historically have gotten certain benefits from traditional insurance brokerages where they felt like a little bit wedded to those organizations, and I think increasingly less so. And there are also parallel companies like Side in insurance that are making it easy for people to strike out on their own. And then I think the third vertical where we're starting to see this is in wealth management, where the parallel there is it's really a wealth manager is really just an individual who has relationships and gives advice to people, which at the end of the day is what real estate agents do. And they help them facilitate whatever investments they want to make. And so in the wealth management industry, we're seeing something similar where there are what we might call brokers as a service platforms emerging to help that class of people perform their day-to-day duties as wealth managers and not have to worry about the back office that a traditional kind of large company might have been able to provide to them in the past. So I think this concept that I like to call kind of brokerage as a service or back office as a service is, I think, really started in real estate, but is now expanding to many other industries. And it's an incredibly exciting thing to be a part of. So I would just say to the audience here, the early side agents, I think you guys were incredibly, had a lot of foresight in seeing where this could go. And I think that this is the future of your industry. This is where the real estate brokerage this is what real estate brokerage will look like in 5 or 10 years. And you guys were sort of the first there. So I think that's something to be proud of.
Yeah, no, that's great. And I really do see with the onset of the shelter-in-place orders and everything like that, that really did accelerate, I think, people's mindset, because the real question is, why do you need to go to, the mothership or the mother office, right? What value are those organizations really bringing when you can do it yourself? Probably do it better anyway. And so really what you need is back office support so that you can keep on focusing on what you do best, which is going out and talking to the customers.
Absolutely. Yeah, you couldn't have said it better. I think another way to think about it is, this concept of an economic concept of competitive advantage, like the idea that everyone should lean into what they do kind of differentially better than the next person. I think Side supports that idea because it frees agents to do what they do best, which is really meeting new customers, prospects, cultivating them, building relationships, selling. Those are the activities that the side agents, they're good at. They're at the top of the industry because they're good at those things. And I think the fact that Side frees people to focus on those things is really powerful. And I think to the extent that technology can play a role in enabling people to lean into whatever their competitive advantage is, I think an entire workforce will become more efficient as a result of that.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. I think one of the things I also think is super interesting around what we're, the advantage of Side and allowing people to focus on their expertise is that, especially in real estate, the opportunity to really improve the reputation of the real estate industry. And that is because we are really great professionals are no longer going to be tied to this kind of big box brand where there are so many different types of folks who are working on it. And by being able to create specific brands for themselves, they're really able to build a reputation that is based upon quality and professionalism. I think it's important from Side's perspective is that we never really want to go down and become the average real estate agent. We always want to keep on the top, and we want to be able to have really great professionals who are not quite at the tippy top that we really target, but give them an opportunity to be mentored by some of the great partners that we do have at the tippy top so that they can make it there. I don't think we'll ever be in a place where we want to be able to, come one, come all aspect of it, because we want to really jointly lift the reputation of this whole profession, because it's truly a profession, but because of the pure numbers that are involved and some of the other folks that are involved, it doesn't quite get the respect that it deserves, given the level of professionalism that we see within our own partner base for it. So I'm really super excited. The ability to go for the top folks and being able to create opportunity of the soon-to-be top folks.
Absolutely. And I think that's another thing that Side enables. If you think about it, if you fast forward 5 years or so and you think about where Side is and where some of the traditional brokerages are or will be, Side will have won over many top agents of the industry, as well as many of the really promising up-and-comers who want to be associated with top agents. And if the natural question is, who is left? Who will be left? Who will be left are probably the average real estate agent who will kind of continue to work for the traditional brokerage, or at least that's my view, to take an extreme point of view. And if that's true, then you kind of have this bifurcation. I think we're at the very beginning of a really interesting bifurcation that could happen in the industry, where if you have really top performers who are capable of supporting their own books of business, those people will choose to strike out on their own and be independent. If, on the other hand, on the other half of the industry, you have people who need the support of a parent brokerage, who are maybe not quite as productive, they may continue down the traditional path of working for a brokerage. And I think in that world, it's really clear, which side of that world do you want to be on? I think the choice is pretty natural.
Yeah, no, exactly. Like if you were an up and coming professional, who do you want to be mentored by? Someone who has, just a part of a big box and be part of that machine, which may have some advantages, or do you want to be mentored by a winner, by someone who's at the top? And so I think the ability to start bifurcating and being able to really have a group of people who are just at the top of their profession is going to be an amazing scenario. And I think you're right. I think that is where it's going. Awesome. So we talked a little bit about kind of the transactions, kind of where technology is taking independent professionals. I'd love to talk a little bit about prop tech in particular. What are you seeing in what's happening in prop tech? I'd love to kind of get your perspective on that.
Absolutely. Yeah. So I lead our prop tech practice here at BankCap Ventures, and it's a really fun job because prop tech is so vast and so diverse. So, I always chuckle a little bit when there's this label prop tech that we all use in the industry. But if you think about it, what does prop tech actually mean? Prop tech means so many different things. Prop tech can mean everything from a software company to a buying platform like Open Door. There's so much diversity. So because of that, it's hard to answer, what's happening in prop tech generically, because I think if you looked at different slivers of it, you would get really, really different answers. And I can tell you that there are certain parts of the prop tech ecosystem right now that are really struggling and having a hard time because of COVID. And retail real estate is a good example of that, and commercial real estate's really struggling at the moment. And then there are other really bright corners of the prop tech market that are surging, like we've talked about a bit with residential real estate volume. So I think there are different answers depending on the part of the prop tech ecosystem you look at. I think what we're focused on is obviously finding those bright corners. What are the areas of growth in this new world that we're living in? And what tools and technology and software will support the way the world is going to change, where you can just order stuff overnight becomes really useful. So I think, there are countless anecdotes that we could talk about that are just fascinating in terms of the impact COVID has had on prop tech.
Got it. Now how about in terms of when you think about the real estate tech stack in terms of almost like the transaction of closing a residential home, for example, what are some of the things that you've been seeing in that area?
Totally. Yeah, that's probably, that's one of the most innovative corners of prop tech, I think, is around the transaction. So if you think about the full life cycle of a real estate transaction, from, at the top of the funnel, you have kind of home discovery, and just wanting to kind of explore in on your web browser properties out there, to engaging with an agent, to ultimately deciding what house you want to buy, and then having to negotiate and close and get title insurance and financing and all that stuff. So there are big companies tackling every part of that supply chain all the way through to close. And I think that's definitely an area of focus for us too, because we have a lot of heritage in financial services technology, which intersects with a lot of parts of that value chain. I think what stands out to me, just for this audience that might be interesting, is most of the companies we see are really point solutions. So, there are a lot of companies, for instance, that are tackling title insurance, but just title insurance, figuring out how to kind of issue it more efficiently and with less paperwork and less kind of headache on the part of agents and consumers. And there are like 6 or 7 startups that are just going after title insurance, and then similarly 6 or 7 going after escrow, going after efficient closings and so forth. And I think what has always interested me about Side is that Side is one of the only platforms that seeks to be a end-to-end processing platform where you can just go to Side and get everything you need and not have to go outside of that ecosystem in order to discover and buy and move into a house. And I think that's really unique and differentiated about Side's approach to the market. Whereas, most of the companies I meet with, which are, doing great things, but they don't have that kind of aspiration of serving every need in the value chain of purchasing a property.
Got it. Yeah. No, and kind of combining that with, our desire to really help our partners build their brand and also build their team so that they can get as big as they want. And I think in some cases bigger than they've even imagined themselves. And I think kind of tying back to the earlier conversation of just, hey, think about this in terms of remote and increasing your sphere of influence. You don't have to be in the same, maybe a smaller mothership. It doesn't have to be that way. You can really just build out all over, and you've got the technology to keep you centered and keep on growing. So I think that's super exciting. And I think that's some of the things that's really helped get us crystallized in kind of this awful pandemic that is the, a silver lining that came out of it. So, we finished the year. It was crazy. And, we still have a few things that still need to be worked out. I'd love to kind of ask, if you were to give some advice to our partners here, as we eventually get to normal, or what, it might be a new normal. What type of advice would you give them?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I would say, because this audience is so enterprising and so entrepreneurial, I think by virtue of even choosing to join Side in the early days and jumping ship from where all of you were, that's a very clear signal that all of you are willing to kind of take risks and bet on yourselves. And so I would say, lean into that. There's never been a moment, I think, in most of our lifetimes when there will be as much disruptive change as there will be over the next couple of years. And so I would say just keep your nose to the ground and really try to sniff out new tools that are kind of breaking through that might make you more efficient and might enable you to grow your business more quickly. And also just challenge old assumptions you've made. I mean, you've all been successful in the industry doing something right, but be open to the possibility that things will look different in the future, and you might have to adapt your businesses to continue the success you've had historically.
Awesome. And, as an operations person, I will always encourage them to think about what came out of this is probably an increase in productivity and efficiency. And so make sure you take advantage of that. I think, necessity is the mother of invention. And I think that some new processes you've built into place has been created. So take advantage of that and see if you can just leverage off of that and really make 2021 much better. So Merritt, unfortunately, I think we need to end it here. I want to thank you so much for your time, your insight. This has been amazing. And I'm sure the audience thinks they've got a lot to gain out of this. So, it was just great being able to get outside validation on what's happening, as well as the power of Side and really the uniqueness of our partners. So thank you so much. And I want to say goodbye to the audience. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Thank you, ladies. I agree that traditional agents are working more and more like entrepreneurs in their day-to-day, especially over the last year. We're definitely seeing the big shift, even more so as we continue to enter new markets and partner with amazing agents in Texas and Florida. It's also great to hear that we're seeing a similar shift in other industries, such as insurance. Thank you all so much for joining us for 2 jam-packed days for Side by Side. Coming up next is a live Q&A with Guy and Damon John. So take it away, gentlemen.